We're now following some breaking news. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Turkey has agreed to back Sweden's bid to join NATO. The NATO Secretary General tweeted earlier that an agreement was reached to advance Sweden's accession protocol to the Grand National Assembly and assure its ratification. World leaders are gathering in Lithuania this week for the annual NATO summit. Turkey had been a holdout on both Sweden and Finland's accession, but agreed to let Finland in earlier this year. CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now from Vilnius, Lithuania. Okay, Nancy, how much of a surprise was this announcement today?
It's a pretty big surprise because it was only a few hours ago that we got another bombshell from the Turkish president saying that he actually wasn't going to support letting Sweden into NATO until his country, Turkey, was allowed membership in the European Union, something that has been stalled for quite a while, in part because of democratic backsliding in Turkey. And so that really seemed to signal that there wasn't going to be a breakthrough at this summit, as so many NATO leaders, including the President of the United States, had hoped, and that this was going to drag on even longer. And then suddenly, here in Vilnius, the NATO Secretary General sits down, has a meeting with Erdogan, with the leader of Sweden, and they come out shaking hands. And the Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, announces that Erdogan is going to allow Sweden's membership to go forward after all. So we don't know exactly what transpired in this meeting, but it had to be transformative, given how long Turkey has stood in opposition to Sweden joining the alliance.
I mean, and just for our audience joining us now and to understand a little bit of what was keeping Turkey from accepting the admission of Sweden into NATO. I mean, I understand that recently, although they said it was a coincidence, Sweden had started at least jailing one Kurd because of financing what Turkey considers are terrorist groups or considers terrorism. Talk to us a little bit about what led to that holdout, to Turkey not wanting Sweden to take part in NATO.
Right. So Erdogan has long argued that Sweden has been too lenient towards some groups that Turkey considers to be terrorist groups that Sweden, in some cases, would argue are simply protesters exercising their First Amendment rights. These are groups that have protested in the streets in Sweden, militant Kurdish groups in some cases, another group that was associated with a 2016 coup attempt in Turkey. And because of that, Turkey has been, and Erdogan in particular, has been drawing a hard line and saying Sweden needs to address these groups. Sweden needs to extradite some of these individuals back to Turkey before Turkey will step aside and allow Sweden into NATO. Finland, Sweden's neighbor, on the other hand, was kind of given a carte blanche, and they were able to ascend a couple of months ago. But most NATO leaders really believe that allowing both Sweden and Finland into the alliance sends a powerful message to Vladimir Putin. These are two nations that were famously neutral for so many decades, didn't want to be part of NATO. And after Putin invaded Ukraine, they said, you know, we're worried about our own sovereignty. If Vladimir Putin can attack Ukraine unprovoked in this way, who's to say he can't do it to us? And Finland shares an 800-mile border with Russia. They're a neighbor to Russia, just like Ukraine is. And so they stepped up and said they wanted NATO membership, and most member countries wanted to let them in as quickly as possible to send a message to Putin, hey, more countries are on our side, more countries are on Ukraine's side, and they don't support what you're doing.
And I mean, Turkey wasn't the only one. Hungary had also expressed some kind of hesitation. What led them to switch their stance?
That was always a little less clear. Hungary never really outlined what it was that it wanted from Sweden. It seems that Hungary was really there to show support for Turkey, but Hungary's leader had already signaled that once Turkey was willing to allow Sweden into NATO, that Hungary was not going to stand in the way. And so at the end of the day, it was really Turkey that was the obstacle here. And so now that Erdogan has said, according to Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, now that Erdogan has said that he's willing to step aside and allow this to happen, we don't anticipate that Hungary is going to be an obstacle.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, we are talking about the expansion of NATO, countries 31 and 32 of the alliance. The consensus seems to be that, of course, the war in Ukraine accelerated this process or the admission of these two countries, as you were just explaining. But what can we expect Putin will do, will say, will react to, given that the expansion of NATO is one of the things that he cited, or at least the intention to expand NATO, at least from Ukraine, as the reason for the war to begin in the first place? What can we expect from him now?
At least right now, it doesn't appear that NATO membership for Sweden and Finland is necessarily as triggering for him as the possibility of Ukraine someday joining NATO. In fact, just today, a spokesperson for the Kremlin said that if Ukraine were to be allowed membership to NATO, or even a pathway to membership, that would be a very provocative move, and that they would have some kind of response. And that's notable because a lot of what's going to be discussed here in Vilnius over the next couple of days by NATO leaders, including President Biden, is how to create a more specific, clear pathway for Ukraine to join NATO someday. Not now, not while the war is still being waged, because that would, that would sort of open the door to a possible U.S.-Russia direct conflict. It's not going to happen right now. President Biden has said that. Other leaders have said that. But what Zelensky and Ukraine are really seeking is a more clear structure, a pathway for them to eventually join NATO. What do they have to do in order to become part of the alliance someday? And we do anticipate, based on what various leaders have said, that pathway is going to be announced at this summit. And they're also going to be having what's being billed as a big council meeting here at NATO, where even though Ukraine isn't being invited to join right now, it'll be able to meet with them.
Sorry to interrupt. I just got a message, a statement from President Biden. I want to read a little bit on the statement. He is saying he welcomes the statement issued by Turkey, Sweden, and NATO's secretary. He says, I stand to work with President Erdogan and Turkey on enhancing defense and deterrence in the Euro-Atlantic region. And he welcomes Sweden as NATO's 32nd ally. Nancy Cordes, thank you. We'll continue to follow these developments and have much more on America Decides and Primetime with John Dickerson.